Hello there, you Scrub Lords, and welcome back to another episode of Scrub Chats, and this is your host, Many Miles Away, and today we got quite a few things to talk about. Things have been happening over the weekend, and things are going to be coming up in the future, and I wanted to make sure that you guys knew about them in advance, so if you guys are wondering what's going on in the coming months and weeks, you know what's happening. So first things first, boats. Over the weekend, unfortunately, I did not get to play any of them. My bathroom was having some trouble. For those of you who want a little bit more specifics, don't worry, it's not gross. My tub had a leak in it, my bathtub, and what it was doing was it was draining under the through the wall, or not through the wall. It was draining in the bottom of the tub, under the tub itself, and it was leaking into my mother's room, which is my mother's bathroom, which is right on the other side of the bathtub wall. So it was leaking water everywhere. We'd had this issue for about a month now, and my mother scheduled it to come in earlier this last week, but because of some very, very heavy rainstorms we had here in Southern California, it caused a lot of flooding, and my mother had to put it off until Friday. Now, you may be wondering, well, Miles, but boats were on all weekend. Yes, the thing is that the resin that they use to clean the bathtub, or not clean it, to repair the bathtub and cover up that leak hole that was causing so much issue, the resin they use for that is toxic for several hours after they put it on, and it smells really bad for a good 2 days afterwards. I mean, there's still whiffs of it in my apartment right now. So what that means is that I couldn't be at home. I had to leave the apartment for the weekend and stay at my dad's place, which is across town. And at my dad's place, all I have there is a crappy 2010 Dell laptop. Not exactly what you would use to play War Thunder. So I did not get to play anything over the weekend. This gameplay is recorded from late December. I was just saving it in case I was going to do another Scrub Chats video. So this was relatively recent gameplay. I think this is shortly after the patch was released. In any case, so unfortunately I don't really have any information on what I thought of the boats and any gameplay. I'd like to be showing you guys some gameplay, but I just don't have any. And watch, I think I fucked up the shot on the Panther too. Yep, I fucked that up really bad. Anyway, but yeah, sorry guys, I don't have anything on the boats. I can't really give you my opinions because I don't really have any opinions to give, other than the fact that they looked cool. I heard a lot of people were complaining about how the seas were a bit rough on the map and it made aiming quite difficult. And it looked to me that Gaijin had turned off the whole gun sight stabilization for the vertical axes. It looked like they turned that off from some of the gameplay I watched from Mike Goes Boom's stream and a few other sources. But other than that, they looked cool. They looked a lot more polished than they did beforehand. Granted, though, I wasn't playing, so I don't know exactly how well it runs on my system. I remember in the other two boat tests, I was getting about 30 frames per second when I was recording. And even when I wasn't recording, I was getting about 45. So still not the most optimized, but again, these are basically alpha tests, so it's important to realize that. However, they look cool, and other than that, there's not much I can give in the way of criticism. I'd like to have played them at least a little bit, but it was not to be. So in regards to what's coming up in the next few months, I should probably clarify. As of the day I'm recording this, the 30th of January, I have just started my first full semester at my local community college. I have no idea what I'm going to be majoring in yet. I don't know exactly what my focus is yet, but I've got time, so I'm not too worried about it. What this means, however, is that I might not be able to adhere and give out as much content as I would like to. Normally, I like to get at least one video out a week. In the case of the Super Unicorn reviews, I like to get those out every 2 weeks. So I'll put out a video the week that you guys don't have a review, like this one. And that Panther had no idea what was coming. In any case, so yeah, I like to keep a somewhat somewhat alternating schedule. So put out at least one video the week that you guys don't have a Super Unicorn review. Put out the Super Unicorn review the week that goes out. And whenever something new comes up, like the boat tests or something like that, I'll generally like to do a stream. Either that or just get a random stream in there somewhere. Now, I was going to stream last Thursday to show off the Qi Nu 2. However, what I did was I was trying to fix the issues I was encountering with OBS and dropping frames. It's been dropping about like 25% of my frames in most of my videos. Or not my videos, or not even the videos I record it with. In the videos and the streams, it's been just dropping frames for no reason. And that's part of the reason why I really dislike OBS. However, it's generally been the most reliable streaming source I've had so far, other than Shadowplay, which just doesn't look as good. So I was trying to fix it, and so what I did was I uninstalled the version I had, which was a slightly older version, and then reinstalled a new one. Well, the problem with the new one is that it refused to connect whatsoever to my to the YouTube streaming server. So I tried multiple things. I tried uninstalling it, reinstalling it again, still nothing. And I even considered setting up the entire thing, but I just decided it wasn't worth the effort that night, and I just didn't even bother. So, for those of you who paid attention to like the live stream thing, who just happened to be there, you'll notice that the thumbnail has changed again, the title has changed, and that was me trying to set up for a stream. The problem is that I just couldn't get the streaming software to work in the first place, so that was a bit of an issue. So I'm going to have to get that resolved before I stream again. Now, with my classes coming up, and with the things I've got to, with my school coming up, I'm going to have to figure out how much work is going to be involved with that school schedule. I already know that one class is going to be quite intensive, and potentially another class is going to be intensive. And for those of you guys who are wondering, I'm just taking a general ed class. I'm actually taking elementary German. And don't worry, all you Germans out there, I've already got somebody who is volunteered to, how should I put it, tutor me on the class, so that should be interesting. And on top of that, I'm taking Java programming and video editing class, which should be really fun. I'm taking that on Saturday, so I'll probably go in, start editing videos at school for actual school projects, and then I'll probably pump me up, and I'll come home and I'll start doing editing at home. But anyway, so what has to come first is school for me. And if that means that I need to sacrifice a week, or if I need to sacrifice some time to focus on school, that's got to come first. I'd like to have it the other way around. I'd like to have school as be sort of a part-time thing, but my dad has made it pretty explicitly clear to me that he would like me to do school full-time. So I'm going to go ahead and honor his wishes for now, and focus on school, and try and further myself in the long run. However, that does not mean I'm going to be giving up on YouTube. That is by no means me saying I'm not going to be doing YouTube anymore. No. I've worked too hard to just walk away from it now, and I enjoy it way too much. So that's my basic update and warning for the coming weeks. If you don't see a Unicorn review every 2 weeks, it's because I've got a lot of work to do that week, and I need to focus on getting my schoolwork done before anything else. And if I have some time to work on a Unicorn review, I'll get it out whenever I possibly can. This will also mean that I'll probably be focusing on vehicles that I play better. Maybe a Super Hellcat review, maybe an M60A1 review. I'm leaning towards an M60A1 review this coming week, simply because I've got quite a bit of gameplay already available to me that I could just go in and record. The other one would be the Chi-Ri, but if I don't do the Chi-Ri this time, I will try and get to the Chi-Ri next time whenever I just have the time to play and get some gameplay footage for you guys. Now, in addition to just War Thunder, I've been talking to some of my subscribers, and I put out a poll in my most recent lineups video about other content you guys may potentially want to see on the channel, and I was talking about Verdun mostly. One subscriber in particular wanted to see more Verdun content on the channel, and a vast majority of you guys voted yes. So there will be some Verdun videos coming up on the channel. It just depends on when I can coordinate with my friend Invincible Hetzer. Richard and I have been friends since I think it was like 2011. We actually met playing Men of War Assault Squad together, and we've just been playing video games together ever since. He's a great guy. He's from Australia. I'd like to call him my tame Australian. He's a great bloke. So we play games together every now and then whenever our time zones kind of intersect, and whenever time is available between us. Normally we can play together. The problem is we can't talk to each other because whenever he's awake, my brother's asleep, and my brother and I share a room at this apartment complex. So sometimes we can't talk to each other, but we'll generally play with each other every now and then. So as soon as we can coordinate some time to play some Verdun, I will be recording that, and I'll try and put together a sort of highlight reel of like funny moments and shit that we happen to witness and put that up on the channel. We'll see what happens. So stay tuned for that coming up on the channel in the coming weeks as soon as I can coordinate that. And let's move on to the next topic. So the last couple of topics I wanted to discuss are some vehicles that I am particularly excited for. Now, some of these vehicles aren't particularly new in terms of having been announced, or some of these are pure speculation that I would like to see. Now, a lot of people over the past few weeks have been commenting about the 6.7 situation, basically ever since I put out that are German tanks overpowered, or my 6.7 lineup videos. And what I'm basically talking about in those videos is the issues with 6.7 and the issues with Tier 4 matchmaking, especially in regards to the Germans and the Americans. The British, I think, are fine. The Russians have some issues, but they've got enough good vehicles there, I think, that they can generally make it work, especially since most of these games are 7.0, and 7.0 vehicles are generally all-around fantastic vehicles. So, basically what I'm getting at here are some heavy tanks for the Americans. Now, the Americans have a lot of things. They've got speed, they've got mobility, they've got some good firepower. What they really lack is a vehicle that can simply drive up there and take hits that's not premium. The only vehicle that's not premium that can currently do that on a pretty regular basis is the T-95, aka the Doom Turtle. And the Doom Turtle has a lot of problems with it. For one, it's a turretless tank, so it can only fire in one direction. Number two, it's the slowest tank in the game. It is godly slow. And getting that heavy of a vehicle to the battlefield takes time, and unless your team is decent enough to hold the line there until you get there, what you'll often find is that you'll get there right as your team's either about to be overrun, or your team has just steamrolled the enemy on that flank, and you never see a single enemy tank the entire game. So the T-95, although good, has some issues. The premium T-29 right now is the best American Tier 4, hands down. And there are issues with that. For one, it's premium. And there are some real issues with introducing the T-29 as a premium. For one, since it's the only American heavy tank that can properly play as a heavy tank. And I'm not talking about the Super Pershing. The Super Pershing, despite what the game says, is not a heavy tank. Even if it is a heavy tank, it is a very crappy heavy tank at best. The T-29 combines all the things you really want in a heavy tank. Good, decent forward mobility. It doesn't have to be great, but it's actually pretty good on the T-29. Very, very good armor. Or armor that can survive multiple hits. And very good firepower. The T-29's 105mm gun, while not perfect and still outclassed by the 88mm gun in the King Tiger, is still very, very powerful in and of its own right, for reasons I have discussed in other videos. So what the Americans really need right now is they need some sort of heavy armor. The Russians don't really have now that I think about it, don't really have very much in the way of heavy armor either, other than the IS-3. But the IS-3, much like the American T-32, well, actually, the IS-3 is its own separate issue. I'll get to that in a moment. Going back to the Americans, the T-32, I always thought when the Americans were announced, for their ground forces, and they announced the T-32 was going to be in. I always thought the T-32 would be the American King Tiger. I always thought that it should be either 6.7 or 7.0, and that it should face mostly King Tigers. And Gaijin appear to have disagreed with me in all modes except for arcade. Recently, they dropped the battle rating of the T-32 from 7.3 in arcade to 7.0, and from what I hear, I haven't really tested it since I don't really play arcade all that much, from what I hear, the T-32 is a monster at 7.0. And to be frank, the Americans need it. Because, in my opinion, you shouldn't have to spend $40 to get a competitive machine. And for those people who say that War Thunder's pay to win, you've got a pretty compelling argument there in the guise of the T-29. The American T-29, with the exception of the King Tiger, is the best heavy tank in the game for its battle rating, besides the King Tiger. And you can get a premium version of the King Tiger that's actually better than the regular King Tiger anyway. So, what I'm saying is that there are a few vehicles that need to be introduced to help the Americans out at Tier 4. And these need to be, 1, the T-29E3. The T-29E3 is the version that you see in World of Tanks with a turret mounting a stereoscopic rangefinder on the rear of the turret. It looks really weird. I'll put a picture of it up on the screen there. The next vehicle is also part of the T-series, and that is the T-34. No, not the Russian T-34. This is an American heavy tank, the T-34. This is a T-29 mounting an experimental 120mm gun. So, kind of like, think of an M103, but with T-29 armor. And that's basically what you've got. I don't know exactly what shells it fired. I know that it fired armor-piercing, high-explosive, and I think they were developing an HVAT round for it, which for the rest of the world is APCR. Although, because APCR is pretty dubious at best in War Thunder, that probably doesn't mean anything. And then the last vehicle that needs to be introduced is the T-30. And if you thought that the T-29 couldn't get any better, the T-30 is the T-29 with a 155mm long tom artillery piece as its main gun. Now, the 155 long tom was one of the biggest American artillery pieces during the Second World War. It had tremendous high explosive power and was used as part of our heavy artillery regiments. And one of the things that the Germans were terrified of, and one of the things the Germans never did quite get right throughout the course of the Second World War, was the ability to call in concentrated, accurate, and heavy artillery fire on very, very accurate and precise points. The Americans quickly realized that their artillery advantage, that their system for calling in artillery, gave them an immense advantage over German strongpoints. So if they encountered lots of resistance in one area, they could call it, and they didn't want to really deal with it and take too many casualties, they just call in the artillery. The artillery will blast it into submission generally. They got so accurate with this artillery that they could call it in on and focus artillery on individual vehicles. And the American 155mm long tom was a big part of that. So the fact that you're taking this massive artillery piece and mounting it on a tank is pretty ridiculous. Now, I wouldn't get overly excited as much as I want to, because this is going to have some serious consequences, and consequences that the Americans found out the hard way. The problem with mounting a gun as large as the 155 is, first of all, weight. The vehicle is ridiculously heavy. Second of all, the rate of fire is awful. Unless you're going to make some sort of automated loading system or assisted loading system, the rate of fire of these large caliber guns is very, very low. And you see that on vehicles like the KV-2, the Soviet Su-152. You see that on most of these bunker-busting vehicles, like the Sturmtiger, which were designed to take out fixed fortifications. Now, the T-30 is, and the T-series in general, the basic way you could describe that entire series of vehicles is the Americans were trying to figure out how big of a gun they could conceivably put on a tank and make it work. And the 120 millimeter they found was about the limit they could probably do and make it practical. However, practicality aside, the T-30 I think would be a wonderful addition to the game. Even if its armor-piercing capability isn't particularly great, imagine the high explosive capability. Think of a KV-2 with actual armor. And that's it, with an even higher muzzle velocity. And that's basically what you have with the T-30. You don't even have to fire armor-piercing with this sucker. You just drive around firing HE at everybody. And you'll really, really ruin their day. The mouse will... Even the mouse will have difficulties with the T-30 simply because it's a massive fuck-off 155mm gun. But again, the issues you have with it, it's the same T-29 chassis and armor protection. So, and odds are it's going to be a much higher battle rating to compensate for its firepower. And so you've got the same armor capability, but it's going up the battle ratings, and we found a perfect example of this is the King Tiger 105, that as you go up the battle ratings, guns tend to get to be a little bit more powerful as you progress through the battle ratings themselves and up the tiers. So, depending on where they put the T-30, God, I really hope they don't put it at 7.3, because 7.3 is kind of like the death knell for... 7.3 is really the death knell for those types of vehicles. The T-32 is a really, really good example of that, because the T-32's firepower is okay. It's not great. It's okay. It's got a gun with it's got a gun that with APHE. Oh my god, I just fucked that up really bad in the game. It's got a gun with APHE that has just over 200 millimeters of penetration at a battle rating of 7.3. Its only advantage is its turret armor and the fact that it can go hold down and be very, very well protected. The problem is that because it's 7.3, that allows it to see ATGMs or lots of ATGMs like the Raketen Jagdpanzer II Hots, the IT-1, and multiple other really, really high tier vehicles which have penetration that just laughs at the T-32's frontal turret armor. So the one thing the T-32 needs to be good at in order to survive, it's not, because it's rendered completely irrelevant by the ridiculously high penetration values of those tiers. So, the T-30 and the T-30 and the T-34 would be in the same boat if they were put at 7.3. Now, do I think that a T-30 versus, say, what's a German 6.0 tank? The Sturm Mill is fair? Kind of. I mean, the Sturm Mill can handle it. Russian 6.0 vehicles. Let's see here. Actually, I don't think the Russians have very many 6.0 vehicles. I could be wrong with that. So let's move it up to 6.3. So 6.3 vehicles. The T-44 really has issues with the T-29. But that's normal. The T-44 has issues with a lot of things. But it's fast, it's low profile. Its frontal hull armor is pretty much impervious to most things except for APDS. Let's see, the German Jagdpanther can kill the T-29 with its long 88mm gun. The Sturm Mill can kill with its 128mm gun. The Tiger 2P can kill with its 88mm gun. The only nation I see having a problem with this is the British, and the British, unless you're playing arcade, are almost always on your team. So British versus Americans could potentially be an issue, but if they're put at 7.3 or 7.0, the British have vehicles like the Conway and the Centurion Mark 10 on their side, which are devastating guns, or both feature devastating guns. So what I'm saying is that putting these vehicles at a 7.0 or a 7.3 battle rating wouldn't be that much different to having a T-29 in the game that we have already. It would be just slightly higher. They would have bigger guns, which means they have more potential one-hit stopping power. In the case of the T-30, it'll probably just be an HE spammer, because American solid shot ammo is awful. You thought British solid shot ammo was bad. Yeah, look at the Americans. So, what I'm saying is that to fix American Tier 4s, they need to do a couple of things. First of all, they should introduce the T29E3 as a regular tech tree vehicle, not as a premium. Give everybody the ability to unlock the T29 without having to dip into their pockets and throw $40 at the game, because that's expensive. I know more than a few games that go for under $30. They go for under $30, for that matter. Verdun is under $30. Also, you need to lower the T-32's battle rating from 7.3, which it really shouldn't be there. I've never understood why it's there. Down to 7.0. And I can already hear Tigers complaining, "Oh, but I can't kill it from the front." Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. You're not supposed to. I mean, the only place you can penetrate that vehicle reliably and kill it is the lower glasses plate. Or you get a lucky penetration through the upper hull. By the way, they've also confirmed that the T-32E1 is going to be in the game, which has an improved hull. Instead of the hull being rounded, it's basically a straight slope on the front. So maybe once they introduce the T-32E1, that we might get a lower variant of the regular T-32. The M103A2 has also been, I think they said it was also possible. The M103A2 is basically an M103 with the M60's engine, so it'd be a lot more mobile than it is currently. So the T-32, as initially overpowered as many people would think it is, has significant issues of its own. Like I said, the best rounds on it have barely 200 millimeters of penetration, which means you have to get pretty darn close to the enemy tanks. Also, it's got a really, really massive muzzle brake on this massive barrel, which means that you can hit the muzzle brake quite easily without much difficulty if you're a decent shot, and take the vehicle's gun out of action quite quickly. And on top of that, since it's two-piece ammunition, it has a very, very long reload. I think base reload on it is like 14 seconds. It's really not all that good. Or I think it's like 19 or 20. I could be wrong. But again, it's really not all that good. However, the T-32 gives the Americans proper armor protection, a proper vehicle to hold the enemy in place, and dish out some damage in the meantime, while the rest of the American forces, or British forces for that matter, can flank and do what they do best with their 90mm APHE rounds. Or for that matter, the T-29 can flank. The T-29 is fast enough to be a decent flanker, and it has the armor protection to survive. So, yeah, that would also be a good combination right there. And then you need to introduce I'd say the T-34 at either 6.7, probably 6.7 to be honest, and then the T-30 at 7.0 or 7.3, and give the Americans some real big gun firepower. So those are my opinions on how to fix American Tier 4s and how to make life easier for the Americans, because right now the Americans aren't doing so hot. They're not terrible, but they could be way better. Also, for those of you out there who are all about, they should introduce the T-69 and the T-57, the T-58, basically the American auto-loading vehicles with the oscillating turrets. You could potentially introduce those, but frankly, I don't think they're necessary. And Gaijin the way Gaijin have stated the way they set up their tech trees is that they don't like introducing prototypes that they don't have to. And I think that those are some prototypes we really don't need. As cool as they would be, they aren't really needed if you catch my drift. So, without further ado, let's actually move on to one more topic, and that is the French tanks. Yes, French tanks have finally been confirmed, so let's get into that. So, French tanks, yes, they've been confirmed, and they were confirmed in a recent, I think it was Thunder Show? I think it was Thunder Show, yeah. Where at the end of these Thunder Show videos, and that was some weird ass funky shit with the disappearing king tiger. I didn't know that the Germans had expert cloaking devices for their king tigers during the Second World War. Anyway, so French tanks were confirmed in one of their most recent videos. At the end of every one of these videos, they do like a Q&A, like a lighthearted Q&A session where they just sort of like throw out some really general answers and answer questions, generally in either a humorous or short manner. And one of the questions that was asked was, are French vehicles coming? Or are French tanks in the Italian tree, in the Italian aircraft tree coming? Or something along those lines. And they said, yes, the French tanks are coming this year. So what is the French line going to be like? Well, if World of Tanks is any indication, they're going to bring a whole host of autoloaders. Now, we got our first taste of autoloaders with the Chi-Ri in this last patch, the Chi-Ri 2 being the very first autoloader ever introduced into the game. And for some people, it was a fantastic vehicle. Like myself, I love the Chi-Ri. Others are supremely disappointed after playing the Chi-To in all its glory. So, which I can understand. The Chi-To is a very, very, very competitive vehicle for its tier, and the Chi-Ri just feels a bit like a downgrade, despite having that autoloading capability. Regardless, that's a different topic. So, autoloaders are going to make up the predominant end part of the French tech tree. Their early tech tree is going to feature a lot of different types of vehicles, so we're going to have vehicles like the Char B1, the Samur tanks, Actually, you know what? Let me just pull up a French tech tree, user-made tech tree that some people have put together. Give me 1 second. So I don't want this to drag out for the next, 45 minutes, so you're gonna quickly run through these tech trees right quick here. So, for early French vehicles, a lot of it's going to be based on lessons the French learned during the First World War. The French were actually considered to have the most powerful, most well-armed and well-armored tanks of the 30s and the early 40s. They were considered to be vastly superior in terms of armored design to the German tanks, which inevitably in the end defeated them. And a lot of that comes down to not necessarily the tanks themselves, although in some cases that was certainly true. It more came down to the training, the tactics, and the lack of radios and in a lot of these French vehicles, and as well as a number of other factors which I'm sure are out there. So a lot of these early French designs are going to be slow, well-armed, or not even necessarily well-armed in terms of anti-tank capability, but well-armored vehicles. So even their light tanks are going to be in the 25 to 30 ton range. So you've also got, in addition to these lightly armed, heavily armored infantry-style tanks, really, really fast, decently hard-hitting armored cars. As they go up the tiers, these are going to get these are going to get far more devastating as you go up the tiers. So, starting down in tier 1, you got like Renaults, early AMRs, R35s, H35s, you got the Char Bs. Now, the Char Bs were like the most powerful tanks on the battlefield, next to the KV-1, which most nations still didn't know about, because the Russians did a pretty damn good job of keeping those things secret. And the Char B1 was well armored. It had about 60 millimeters on the front, and it was pretty well sloped. It also had a 75 millimeter gun mounted in a fixed sponson. It had vertical elevation, but it had no horizontal traverse. And I'll get to how they aimed that gun in a second. And then they had a one-man turret, as was common with most French designs early on, featuring a 47 millimeter gun. Now, the one-man turret versus three-man turret is another debate entirely. What it comes down to is workload. one of the problems with a lot of French tanks is that the commander had literally so much to do, because he had to not only aim his gun, fire his gun, load his gun, but he also had to command the tank, tell the driver where to go, because the driver would oftentimes close the vision slits on a lot of these tanks, German tanks especially. They had an armored housing on most of their on most of like the Panzer IIIs and 4s that the driver would close, and he would be almost completely relying on the commander from that point. So the commander had to tell the tank where to go. Driver reverse, driver go forward, driver turn left, turn right. And on top of that, he had to manage a radio if he had one. And if he was the platoon commander or the brigade commander, God help you, because at that point you would either rely on signal flags, or generally the command tank would be the only one that had a radio. The French tanks had issues, despite their merits, and that inevitably led to their downfall, that in superior German tactics. So you're going to have a lot of these types of tanks early on in the tech tree. I imagine tier 1 to 2 is going to be around there. Tier 3 is where it starts to get a little bit weird, because, well, there's not a lot of French tank development going on under the German occupation. It's kind of difficult when your industry is owned by the Germans, when your major cities are being occupied by the Germans, and all your industrial capacity is being utilized by the Germans. So, except for maybe some development in Vichy France, although don't quote me on that, I'm not sure if that's true. So, during the occupation, the French didn't do exactly a lot of tank design and tank development for reasons I've already stated. However, after the war was over, the French were kind of left with a mishmash of American, some British, and lots of German equipment. They actually, for a while, had a French tank division made up entirely of captured German Panthers, funnily enough, after the war, and they used those for quite a while. However, the French were eager to learn from their mistakes. So what did they do? They went for the complete opposite effect. They ditched the armor. They opted for high mobility and superior gun performance, and high velocity guns generally. So what we see that in vehicles like the SA-50 75mm gun, which is a gun that was based off of the German KWK-42 or PaK-42 L-70, which we see on the Jagdpanzer 470 and the Panther. We start to see French experiments into oscillating turret designs. Now, for those of you guys who are not familiar with an oscillating turret, rather than having the gun recoil inside of a turret mount, you basically have the turret is split into two halves. The lower half is responsible for horizontal movement, left to right, side to side. And then you've got the top portion of the turret, which is responsible for up and down, but it also has recoil dampening mechanisms in it, so when the gun fires, the entire turret moves back a short distance, which takes the recoil of the main gun, that and the suspension. And what that allows you to do is house a much bigger gun in or a much more powerful gun on a smaller chassis. And oftentimes what these oscillating turrets would be paired with is auto-loading mechanisms. Because you're sacrificing so much space for this oscillating turret design, the easiest way to load and fire the gun is to get rid of the loader entirely. So a lot of these vehicles would have like 4 to 6 shot magazines, or when I say magazines, they weren't really magazines generally. They were generally sort of like trays of ammunition that you had. And what you had to do is that, especially in the case of vehicles like the AMX 1375, is before a battle, you would get out of the vehicle, you would open up these rear hatches on the back of the turret, you would load in your shells, and you would close the turrets, or you would close these hatches, and then you would go in, you'd fire your few rounds, and then you would retreat. And AMXs would often work in pairs, so one could cover the other guy while he's reloading. And generally, 4 to 6 shells is almost all you need for an actual engagement, because anything more than that and the engagement has gone way too long and you really need to start getting the fuck out of there. And I'll get into that into why that's the case in another video. So French tanks are going from about tier 3 onwards, are start going to focusing on mobility and firepower. So I don't want to say that they're all going to turn out like I I don't want to say they're all going to turn out like is sort of Hellcats, because that's really not fair to them. They've got all sorts of weird and interesting designs. They've got vehicles like the ELC AMX, which is a ridiculously low-profile vehicle, very fast, relatively maneuverable vehicle with a 90mm gun. You've also got the Panhard ERB armored cars, which are basically armored cars with oscillating turrets on them. You've also got the M41 Revolorize, which is basically a Sherman with a 105mm gun stuck into it, also known as a Super Sherman. The Israelis bought a lot of those, that's why you see the Israelis have them. And you've also got vehicles like, later on, like the Batchatilian, also known as the Batchat. You've got vehicles like the AMX 5090mm, you got the AMX 5100, AMX 5120, all those series of vehicles. Now, the French are also going to be, most likely, if they're going to come in the game, if they don't have this vehicle, I am going to be shocked. They're also most likely going to get their hands on the AMX 30, which was sort of like the French version of the Leopard. So, it's very, very similar in concept. They trade almost all armor for fast movement and excellent firepower. Fires standard NATO ammunition. However, if they're going to introduce the AMX-30s right, they're going to need to introduce them with heat ammunition as standard rather than APDS. Again, I will get into that in another video, especially more towards when the vehicles are actually released. So, that's going to wrap it up here for Scrub Chats episode 6. We've been running on here for about 40 minutes. I've got to get this video rendered and uploaded for you guys before I head on to my next class here in a couple of hours. Let me know what you guys think of the French tanks down in the comment section. Let me know if you guys agreed with my potential solutions for fixing American Tier 4. And let me know if you guys really want some more other content on the channel like Verdun. Without further ado, this has been Mighty Miles Away. Keep your tracks checked, keep your binos in place, keep around in the tube, and I will see you guys in the next video.